Hey everyone, welcome back. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge Family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
I was standing at O'Hare International Airport with a duffel bag digging into my shoulder and a stiff combat uniform that still smelled like the supply room. The terminal was loud, bright, and busy, but the noise faded the moment my sister lifted her phone and aimed the camera at me. "Go say goodbye to your followers," Chloe said, already smiling at her own reflection. "My sister is deploying today." She didn't say it with pride. She said it like she was introducing a background character. Chloe Miller was glowing. Perfect hair, designer coat, phone held at just the right angle. She had built an entire career convincing strangers online that her life was aspirational. Right now, her live stream was full of heart emojis and comments telling her how strong she was for letting her sister go. I stood there silent while she read them out loud. "Look at this," she laughed. "They think you're some kind of hero already." She tilted the phone closer to my face. I could see myself on the screen. Flat expression, no makeup, hair pulled back tight. I looked exactly like what I was, a soldier about to disappear for months, with no promise of coming back the same. Or at all. Chloe lowered her voice just enough that the live stream wouldn't catch it. "Honestly," she said, smirking, "you're really going all that way just to do logistics. Moving boxes in the desert." Meanwhile, I'm about to launch a military-inspired fashion line. Real uniforms, real aesthetics. Not whatever this is. She gestured at me with her free hand like I was a prop. What a waste of good family genes. I didn't answer. I adjusted my cap instead. It was easier than reacting. I had learned that years ago. Behind her, my parents hovered close, not to me, but to Chloe. My mother kept tugging at the sleeve of Chloe's coat, smoothing invisible wrinkles. "Stand a little to the left," Mom whispered. "The lighting's better there." My father leaned in. "Make sure the logo's visible," he said, nodding toward Chloe's handbag. No one looked at me when I shifted my bag. No one asked where I was going exactly. No one asked if I was scared. Chloe turned back to the camera. "So yeah, guys, she's heading out. Pray for her, I guess." She laughed. The comment section exploded. I cleared my throat. I should go. My mother finally turned toward me, her smile tight and distracted. "Just don't cause trouble over there," she said. "We can't afford any messes right now. We're busy supporting Chloe's career." That was it. That was the goodbye. No hug, no photo, no come home safe. Just a warning. I nodded once, adjusted my grip on the duffel, and turned toward security. As I walked away, I heard Chloe behind me, voice suddenly soft and dramatic for the live stream. "It's so hard watching someone you love leave like this." I didn't look back. The line for TSA moved slowly. I stared straight ahead, boots planted on the tiled floor, while memories pressed in whether I wanted them to or not. Airports have a way of doing that. Too much waiting, too much thinking. I remembered being 10 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with my homework spread out while Chloe practiced poses in the living room. My parents clapped when she nailed a walk. They never noticed when I aced a test. I remembered being 18, holding an acceptance letter from a state college I actually liked. Chloe cried that night because her dream fashion school was expensive. My parents told me I was the practical one. They told me enlisting would build character. I remembered signing the papers while Chloe posted a photo captioned, "Big changes coming." The TSA agent checked my ID and waved me through. Just like that, the civilian world stayed behind a glass wall. At my gate, I sat down and pulled out my phone. I had one unread message. It was from Chloe. "Don't forget to repost my story. Engagement matters today." I stared at the screen for a long second, then locked the phone and slid it back into my pocket. Across the gate, a young couple hugged too tightly, both crying. A mother held her son's face in both hands, whispering like she was trying to memorize him. I looked down at my boots instead. I wasn't jealous, not exactly. I was used to this. When boarding was called, I shouldered my bag and joined the line. Each step forward felt like crossing another invisible line I wouldn't be allowed to step back over. On the jet bridge, my phone buzzed again. Another notification. Chloe had tagged me in her live stream clip. The caption read, "Sending my little sister off to do her thing. Proud of her courage even if she doesn't dream big." I almost laughed. I took my seat by the window, stowed my bag, and buckled in. As the plane pushed back from the gate, I caught one last glimpse of the terminal through the glass. Somewhere out there, Chloe was probably already checking her follower count. My parents were probably planning a celebratory lunch for her. No one was watching this plane. As the engines roared and the ground began to blur, I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. Not fear, not sadness, but something colder, something steadier. I had learned a long time ago what my place was in that family. Invisible when I stayed, convenient when I paid, embarrassing when I didn't shine. They thought they knew exactly who I was. They thought this deployment was proof that I had settled for less. The seatbelt sign clicked on. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the vibration of the aircraft hum through my bones. I wasn't going anywhere to prove them wrong. I was going because it was the only place I had ever been taken seriously. And before the story goes any further, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been the most reliable person in the room? The one who quietly held everything together while the people closest to you treated you like you were disposable? If that sounds familiar, I want you to tell me in the comments. The cabin lights dimmed and I pressed my forehead lightly against the window as the plane leveled out. The reflection staring back at me looked calm, which was funny because my mind had already started drifting to places I hadn't visited in years. I loosened my collar and exhaled slow and quiet. That simple motion pulled open a door I usually kept shut. I had spent 28 years being the background noise in my own family. Not ignored exactly, more like accounted for the way you account for utilities. Necessary, predictable, and not worth celebrating. Chloe had always been the investment. When she was 12 and decided she wanted to be in fashion, my parents rearranged everything. Weekend trips became inspiration tours. Family savings became seed money. Her hobbies were called potential. Mine were called phases. By the time I was 16, I had learned not to ask for much. I cooked dinner when Mom worked late. I helped Dad file paperwork for the pharmacy. I listened when Chloe complained about classmates who didn't understand her vision. Everyone said I was mature for my age. That was code for self-sufficient. The plane hummed steadily, and I shifted in my seat, remembering the night it finally became official who mattered more. I was 18, holding my acceptance letter, trying not to smile too hard. State school, partial scholarship, nothing glamorous, but it was mine. I placed the envelope on the kitchen counter like it was something fragile. Chloe walked in an hour later. Mascara-streaked phone clenched in her hand. They raised tuition again, she sobbed. If I don't accept now, I'll miss my chance. My parents looked at each other. Then they looked at me. Dad cleared his throat. You're adaptable, Sarah. Mom nodded. You've always been the strong one. By the end of the week, my college fund was gone. Rerouted to cover Chloe's first year at a private fashion institute in New York. By the end of the month, a recruiter was sitting at our dining table sliding enlistment forms toward me, like he was doing me a favor. Just a few years, Mom said. You'll get benefits, experience, discipline. Chloe didn't even look up from her phone. I signed. The flight attendant walked past offering water. I shook my head, hands folded tightly in my lap. Boot camp was the first place I learned what it felt like to be evaluated without bias. No one cared who my sister was. No one asked how many followers I had. I either performed or I didn't. I performed. That pattern followed me through training assignments and promotions. I stayed quiet. I did the work. I let results speak. Back home, nothing changed. Every holiday, Chloe sat at the center of the table recounting brand meetings and influencer drama. I sat at the far end sometimes, literally at the kids' table if extra guests showed up. I was 25 the first time that happened. Just for tonight, Mom said. It's easier, Chloe laughed. She doesn't mind. She's used to it. I was. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that I had been sending most of my paycheck home. 80% give or take. Dad's pharmacy struggled after a chain store opened down the street. I set up automatic transfers, paid invoices, covered inventory gaps. I never announced it. I didn't want thanks. I wanted stability. My reward was overhearing my mother tell a neighbor Sarah's away because she couldn't find a real job here. I stared at the seat back in front of me as that memory resurfaced, jaw tightening just enough to hurt. There was a moment somewhere around year 4 when I considered stopping, cutting off the money, drawing a line. Then Dad called, voice strained. The pharmacy had missed payroll. Just this once, he said. It was always just this once. The plane hit mild turbulence, a soft jolt that pulled me back into my body. I adjusted my belt and let my shoulders relax. I knew how to handle instability. I had trained for worse. Chloe never asked where the money came from. She didn't need to. In her mind, resources simply appeared when she needed them. When she bought a new camera, my parents praised her hustle. When I missed a holiday because of training, they said I was choosing work over family. I learned to keep my life compartmentalized. Family on one side, everything that actually mattered on the other. The cabin lights flickered as the crew prepared for meal service. I waved it off. Hunger wasn't the problem. What stayed with me wasn't the money or the sacrifices. It was the casual way my absence was rewritten. I wasn't serving, I was wandering. I wasn't supporting the family, I was never around. I wasn't building a career, I was stuck. Chloe posted constantly. Fashion week, sponsored trips, curated vulnerability. Every caption about hard work came with a photo I knew someone else had paid for. Sometimes she tagged me, usually as a contrast. Meanwhile, my sister's off doing government stuff she'd write. Couldn't be me, her followers loved it. I was proof that not everyone in the family got the spotlight. I closed my eyes as the plane cut through a stretch of clear air. The steady forward motion grounded me. There was a reason I never corrected them. Part of it was security, part of it was habit, but mostly it was clarity. I had already seen how they treated success that didn't benefit them directly. If they knew what I actually did, they would only hear the parts they could use. Titles, access, money. They wouldn't hear the risk, or the discipline, or the cost. I preferred being underestimated. The captain's voice came over the intercom with routine updates, time zones, weather, arrival details. I listened without really hearing him. Fingers tracing the seam of my sleeve. I had chosen this path, knowing exactly what it would cost me at home. What I hadn't realized, what I was only starting to understand as the plane carried me farther away, was how much being invisible had sharpened me. Every dismissal taught me patience. Every slight taught me restraint. Every unacknowledged sacrifice taught me precision. They thought I was drifting. In reality, I was being shaped. The seatbelt sign flicked off again. I sat up straighter, eyes forward, now the past settling back where it belonged. I wasn't carrying resentment with me. I was carrying memory. And memory, unlike approval, was something I could use. I straightened my posture as the plane began its slow descent, fingers pressing briefly into the armrest until the vibration evened out. That familiar shift from motion to purpose clicked something into place in my head. By the time my boots hit the ground overseas, I was already in work mode. The base didn't look like anything Chloe would ever photograph. No clean angles, no flattering light, just concrete dust and schedules pinned down to the minute. I liked it immediately. I wasn't assigned to logistics the way my family imagined. I had learned early on that letting them believe that version of me saved time. Less explanation, fewer questions, fewer expectations I had no interest in meeting. Officially, I was part of an intelligence and logistics operations unit. Unofficially, we were the people who fixed problems no one wanted attached to their name. The first time I was briefed, I didn't react. That was the habit. Listen, absorb, execute. Colonel Evelyn Thorne stood at the front of the room, arms crossed, eyes sharp enough to cut through noise. She didn't waste words. She didn't tolerate ego. She noticed everything. When she finished outlining the scenario, she looked directly at me. Miller, walk me through the extraction variables. I did. Calm, clean, no filler. She nodded once. Good. You'll run analysis going forward. That was it. No applause, no ceremony, just responsibility. It was the most respect I had ever been given without having to earn it twice. The work was precise. Maps, timelines, supply routes that doubled as escape corridors. Every decision had weight. Every mistake had consequences measured in lives, not likes. I thrived. I learned how to read silence, how to spot patterns others missed, how to calculate risk without dramatizing it. I learned when to speak and when to let information do the talking. Thorne noticed that too. You don't chase credit, she said once after a successful operation wrapped without incident. Why? I shrugged. Credit gets loud. She smiled just barely. Exactly. We worked together long enough that she stopped checking my numbers. Long enough that she trusted my judgment without needing justification. When things went wrong, she didn't raise her voice. She asked one question: what do you need? No one in my family had ever asked me that. I never told them about the promotions, or the classified commendations, or the nights where sleep came in short, tactical bursts. It wasn't secrecy for secrecy's sake. It was practicality. If Chloe knew I had any authority, she'd want proximity to it. If my parents knew my role mattered, they'd rewrite history to include themselves in it. I had no interest in letting them rehearse pride they hadn't earned, so I let them keep believing I shuffled paperwork and loaded crates. I let Chloe joke about me playing soldier. I let my mother sigh theatrically when neighbors asked about me. In my real life, none of that mattered. I mattered. The base ran on routine, briefings at dawn, quiet recalibrations in the afternoon, long nights punctuated by sudden urgency. I trusted the people around me. They trusted me back. Trust is rare. I didn't waste it. When I sent money home, I did it from a separate account, clean, untraceable. I didn't want gratitude tied to access. I wanted distance. The irony wasn't lost on me. I protected my family from information the same way I protected operations from exposure. Compartmentalization wasn't just a skill, it was survival. On one call home, my father complained about rising costs again. My mother said Chloe was under pressure, that success was stressful. I listened. I always listened. Chloe took the phone once, laughing. "You wouldn't get it," she said. "Real careers are demanding." I pictured the briefing room, the map table, the quiet before movement. "You're right," I said. I wouldn't. I ended the call and went back to work. The mission tempo increased that year. Higher stakes, less margin for error. I was given authority without announcement. Tasks came to me automatically. When I spoke, people adjusted. I stayed grounded by keeping things simple. Eat when you can. Sleep when it's allowed. Don't romanticize anything. Hero narratives were for people who didn't understand logistics. Colonel Thorne pulled me aside one evening just before another deployment cycle. "You know you could go public," she said. "Career-wise, I know, you'd advance faster. I'm not in a race." She studied me for a moment. Fair enough. That was the extent of the conversation. I liked that about her. No pressure, no manipulation, just clarity. Back home, Chloe posted a photo wearing a jacket inspired by military silhouettes. She captioned it something about sacrifice and resilience. I saw it between briefings and closed the app. It wasn't anger I felt, it was distance. The longer I lived in this world, the real one, the more obvious it became how little my family knew me. Not just what I did, but who I was when things got hard. They had never seen me under pressure, never watched me make decisions that couldn't be undone, never trusted me with anything that mattered. That wasn't my failure, that was their choice. As preparations ramped up for the next operation, I ran my checks, reviewed contingencies, and confirmed personnel readiness. Everything aligned the way it was supposed to. I felt steady, focused, invisible still, but no longer diminished by it. The difference was simple. This time I was invisible by design. I was checking a secure tablet in a narrow hallway when the notification came through, small and clinical, like it didn't understand the weight it carried. I stopped walking. That alone told me something was wrong. Unauthorized withdrawal. Account activity flagged. I didn't panic. Panic wastes time. I leaned against the wall, reread the alert, and opened the transaction details. One look was enough. My personal savings account was empty, not reduced, not dented, drained. $50,000 gone in a single sequence of transfers. Clean, confident. The kind of movement made by someone who assumed there would be no consequences. I closed my eyes once, just once. Then I straightened and kept moving. I finished the briefing. I signed off on logistics. I made sure every other part of my world stayed stable before touching the problem I already knew I couldn't ignore. When I finally had 5 minutes alone, I called the bank. The representative was polite, careful. She explained what I already saw. The withdrawals had been authorized with a signed release. The signature matched the one on file. It didn't. I asked her to email me the documents. She hesitated, then complied. The signature was mine in shape only, sloppy, rushed, someone copying without understanding muscle memory. I knew immediately who had done it. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I sat very still and felt something in me go quiet. I called home. My mother answered on the third ring. "Sarah, is everything okay now?" I said. "Why is my savings account empty?" There was a pause. Not confusion, calculation. "Oh," she said. "That." I waited. "Chloe needed a reliable car," she continued, "for her image. It's an investment. A Mercedes is not an emergency," I said. My father cut in, his voice sharp. "Don't start, you're taken care of. The government feeds you, clothes you. What do you need savings for?" I gripped the phone tighter. That money was mine. "It's family money," my mother said quickly. "We all benefit when Chloe succeeds." I pictured the signature, my forged name, my consent rewritten. You forged my signature, I said. Silence again, shorter this time. We did what we had to do, my father said. Chloe's brand depends on perception. You wouldn't understand that kind of pressure. I almost laughed. Almost. I'm deployed, I said. That account is for contingencies. You're a soldier, he snapped. Risk is part of the job. Stop being selfish. Selfish. The word landed flat. It didn't sting. It clarified. I ended the call without another word. For a long moment, I just sat there, phone resting in my palm, listening to the low hum of the bass around me. Radios crackled. Boots moved past. Somewhere people were laughing. Nothing in my environment had changed. Only the final illusion I'd been maintaining. I had believed that despite everything there was a line they wouldn't cross. I was wrong. That night I pulled every financial record I had. I documented the forgery. I flagged the account. I didn't initiate a report yet. Not because I couldn't, but because timing matters. Emotion clouds judgment. I waited until mine cleared completely. Chloe posted the car the next day. Glossy photo, perfect angle, caption about hard-earned rewards, comments praising her hustle. My mother commented with heart emojis. My father shared it. No mention of me. I stared at the screen long enough to feel detached from it, like watching someone else's life unravel. A part of me considered confronting Chloe directly, asking her how she justified it, whether she felt anything at all. But confrontation assumes conscience. I had learned better. What surprised me wasn't the theft. It was how easily they rationalized it. How quickly my labor became invisible again the moment it inconvenienced them. I thought about the pharmacy bills I had covered, the late-night transfers, the quiet sacrifices that never earned me a seat at the table. This was the return on that investment. Work didn't stop because my family had crossed a line. Missions don't wait for emotional processing. I compartmentalized the way I always had. But something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer protecting them. I wasn't seeking revenge. I wasn't plotting payback. I was simply recalibrating. That distinction mattered. Colonel Thorne noticed the change before anyone else did. She always did. You're sharper, she said after a briefing, but colder. Temporary, I replied. She studied me. If you need support, you ask. I know. And I meant it. Back in my quarters, I opened a new account, redirected my income, changed every access point. I locked down everything I could without raising alarms. I didn't warn my family. I didn't explain. They had already taken what explanations were worth. The hardest part wasn't losing the money. It was realizing that if I had died on that deployment, they would have justified this too. She would have wanted us to use it wisely. I lay back on the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, letting that thought settle without resistance. The person they thought they knew, the quiet one, the accommodating one, was gone. Not replaced by anger, replaced by clarity. I would still do my job. Still do it well, still keep my head down. But I would never again confuse shared blood with shared values. And the next time they reached for something of mine, they wouldn't be met with silence. They would be met with record-keeping. I was halfway through a logistics update when my phone vibrated against the table sharp and insistent enough to cut through the room. I didn't look at it right away. I finished the sentence, closed the file, and only then turned the screen over. 3 missed calls, all from home. That alone was unusual. My family didn't call unless they needed something. I stepped outside into the heat, found a strip of shade along the concrete wall, and returned the call. My mother answered immediately, breathless. Sarah, have you seen the news? No, I said. What happened? There was a pause, then my father's voice took over. There was an attack, one of the units. They said some soldiers are unaccounted for. I waited. He didn't say my name. Which unit, I asked. They didn't say, my mother cut in quickly, but it's overseas. Where you are. I could hear typing in the background. Not frantic, focused. Are you safe, she asked, but the question felt rehearsed. I'm fine, I said. Why are you calling now? Another pause. This one longer. We just want to be prepared, my father said. You know, in case. In case of what? In case something happened. I leaned my head back against the wall and closed my eyes. What kind of preparation, I asked. My mother hesitated. We were trying to understand. Benefits. Procedures. There it was, not concern, not fear. Logistics. They weren't asking if I was hurt. They were asking what I was worth if I was gone. I opened my eyes and stared out at the base, at people moving with purpose, unaware that my family was already treating me like an unresolved file. "Who told you to look into that?" I asked. "Chloe," my mother said softly. "She's just being responsible." Of course she was. She said it's important to know what the government provides, my father added. Life insurance, survivor benefits, that sort of thing. "I'm alive," I said. "Yes, but I'm alive," I repeated slower this time. They didn't respond right away. When my mother finally spoke, her tone was defensive. "We're just trying to be informed. There's nothing wrong with that." I ended the call before she could say more. My hands were steady, my breathing was controlled, but something in my chest felt finalized. They had moved past stealing from me. Now they were budgeting my absence. Later that evening, after the base quieted down, I pulled up my service records and reviewed the details I already knew by heart. Life insurance, death gratuity, survivor compensation, $750,000. That was the number Chloe had been Googling. I didn't feel fear reading it. I felt detached, like I was reviewing someone else's profile. I thought about my grandmother's house, the small one she'd left to me years ago, the only place in my childhood that ever felt calm. She'd made it clear in her will that it was mine alone. I checked the property records. Everything was still intact, for now. 2 days later, Chloe posted a story. It was subtle by her standards. A black and white photo, a caption about holding family close during uncertain times. Comments poured in, sympathy, support, speculation. She didn't tag me. She didn't need to. In the next call home, my mother mentioned almost casually that they'd spoken to a lawyer. "Just to understand the paperwork," she said. "In case you're unreachable for a long time." "I'm reachable," I said. "You've been calling me." "Yes, but if something happens," my father added. "It's better to have authority. Authority over what I asked." "The house," my mother said. "Your grandmother's place. It's a responsibility." I laughed then. It slipped out before I could stop it. "That house is in my name," I said. "It always has been." "Well," my father said, "laws can be flexible, especially if someone is declared unfit or absent." Unfit, absent. They weren't even pretending anymore. I hung up and sat in the dark, phone resting on my knee, letting the implications line up cleanly in my head. They weren't waiting for me to come back. They were preparing to replace me. From that moment on, every interaction shifted. Chloe's messages became oddly formal. My mother asked pointed questions about timelines. My father requested copies of documents he had no right to. I gave them nothing. Instead, I started documenting everything: dates, calls, messages, screenshots. I didn't confront them. I observed. Observation had always served me better than reaction. The next briefing cycle came and went. Another mission began to take shape. Higher risk, limited extraction windows. I focused on my work. It was the one place where nothing was twisted, nothing was misrepresented. Objectives were clear, outcomes mattered. But even as I recalculated routes and assessed contingencies, I understood something with absolute certainty. If I disappeared on this mission, my family wouldn't mourn me. They would monetize me. That knowledge didn't distract me. It clarified my priorities. I updated my directives. I named contingencies. I made sure that if the worst happened, no one back home could touch anything that mattered. Not my assets, not my legacy, especially not my silence. The night before deployment, I lay awake longer than usual, listening to the base settle around me. I wasn't afraid of the mission, I was aware of the cost, and I was done paying it blindly. When morning came, I put on my gear, checked my equipment, and stepped into the transport without looking back. If my family was already planning for a world without me, then I would make sure that world didn't belong to them. The helicopter lurched sideways hard enough to slam my shoulder into the frame, and I knew before the warning light flashed that we were going down. There's a moment right before impact when everything gets very practical. No panic, no speeches, just checklists running faster than thought. I tightened my grip, shouted coordinates I wasn't sure anyone could hear, and braced. The crash was violent but short. Metal screamed, the world spun. Then it stopped. Smoke, heat, the smell of fuel. I was moving before my head caught up, dragging myself clear, counting bodies by instinct. 3 hostages, 2 teammates, everyone breathing, barely. The radio was dead. We were in dense jungle, far from any clean extraction route. The pilot was unconscious but alive. My shoulder burned with a deep, wet pain I didn't have time to examine. I took command without announcing it. No one argued. I got us away from the wreck first. Distance buys time. Time buys options. I set a heading, redistributed supplies, and made decisions quickly, without drama. When people are scared, certainty is oxygen. By nightfall, we were off every map that mattered. The next morning, the pain in my shoulder had settled into something sharp and constant. I wrapped it tight, adjusted my sling, and kept moving. If you stop injuries, get opinions. We traveled light, slow when needed, fast when we could. I rotated watch schedules, kept voices low, and rationed water aggressively. I chose routes that looked wrong to anyone else. The kind that don't get checked because they don't look useful. They were useful to us. On day 3, we heard aircraft overhead. Friendly, maybe, or not. I held the group still for a full hour until the sound faded. Risk management isn't heroic. It's boring and effective. By day 5, we were officially missing. I knew how that would read back home. I didn't dwell on it. There was no bandwidth for family narratives in a survival situation. The hostages were exhausted but cooperative. That mattered. People behave better when you treat them like adults. I explained choices without over-explaining danger. I gave them small tasks so they felt useful. Morale is logistics. My shoulder got worse. Infection set in around day 7. Fever tried to negotiate. I declined. I cleaned the wound twice a day. Teeth clenched, hands steady. Pain is information. It tells you what needs attention. It doesn't get to make decisions. On day 8, we crossed a river that shouldn't have been crossable. It took 6 hours and everything we had left. I lost a boot and replaced it with tape and stubbornness. We kept moving. At night, when the jungle went loud, I lay awake counting variables. Weather patterns, enemy movement, distance to a zone I could maybe reach if everything went right. Everything rarely goes right. That's why you plan for wrong. By day 10, one of the hostages started coughing blood. I adjusted pace and redistributed weight without discussion. We would move slower. We would still move. I never told them how close we were to running out of time. On day 12, we found an abandoned trail. Old, barely visible. I recognized it from a briefing years earlier. The kind of detail that sticks when you pay attention. I changed direction without consulting anyone. Confidence again. Oxygen. The radio crackled once that night. Static. Then nothing. I didn't answer. If someone was listening, I didn't want to teach them how close we were. On day 14, we reached the edge of the extraction zone at dawn. I signaled with what little power we had left and waited. When the aircraft finally came in low and careful, I felt relief for exactly 3 seconds. Then I focused on loading procedures and security arcs until everyone else was safe. Only then did I let myself sit. The med team worked on my shoulder immediately. Infection confirmed. They told me later that I'd been walking on adrenaline and discipline. I believed them. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, someone said my name with awe in their voice. I ignored it. Awe doesn't keep you alive. Systems do. Back in the States, I learned what had happened while we were off the map. 14 days missing had been enough. Chloe had posted a tribute by day 4. Black dress, soft lighting, caption about praying for miracles. Engagement spiked. Brands commented with support. By day 7, my mother had been photographed crying outside the pharmacy. My father gave an interview about strength and faith. By day 10, they were talking to lawyers. They discussed benefits openly, survivor compensation, insurance timelines, the house, always the house. They spoke about me in the past tense before anyone had confirmed anything. Chloe sold my things while I was bleeding in the jungle, old medals, letters, anything that looked meaningful on camera. She called it letting go. When I woke up in a hospital bed with clean sheets and white light, Colonel Thorne was standing at the foot of it, arms crossed. "You disappeared," she said. "I came back," I replied. She nodded. "You saved everyone. I did my job." She watched me for a moment. "The governor wants a briefing." I closed my eyes briefly, not from exhaustion, from understanding. "What about my family?" I asked. "They've been very visible," she said carefully. "Good," I said. "Then this won't surprise them." I didn't ask for recognition. I didn't ask for timing. I let the system do what it does best when you feed it the truth. Because while I was fighting to keep people alive, my family had already decided who I was when I couldn't contradict them. 14 days off the map had shown me something simple. They didn't need me alive. They just needed me useful. That was about to change. I adjusted the sleeve of my plain dress as I stepped into the hotel ballroom and let the noise wash over me without reacting. Crystal chandeliers, soft music, the kind of space designed to make money feel comfortable. The Sterling Hotel had been chosen for visibility, not sentiment. Chloe never missed an opportunity to stage success. I hadn't told my family I was back in the country. I hadn't told anyone outside a very small circle. Recovery had been efficient, quiet, purposeful, and during that silence I had done something I had never done before. I had watched them, every call, every message, every transaction. I worked with a military legal officer named Marcus Webb, a man who treated documentation the way surgeons treat sterile instruments. No emotion, no shortcuts. Forgery, financial exploitation, attempted asset seizure, preemptive inquiries into death benefits. While I was listed as missing, we didn't rush. Truth holds better when you let people stack lies on top of it. The invitation to my parents' anniversary arrived 2 weeks after I was cleared to travel. 30 years of marriage. Formal attire. Chloe listed as the event organizer. I accepted without replying. The ballroom was already half full when I arrived. Guests in tailored suits and dresses clustered around high tables laughing easily. Chloe's crowd, sponsors, local press, people who believed success was contagious. I took a seat at the back. Not hiding, just unimportant. No one recognized me. That was expected. A waiter passed. I declined champagne. I wanted my head clear. On stage, Chloe moved like she owned the room. Confident, polished. She wore a red dress that caught every light. My mother sat in the front row, smiling too brightly. My father stood nearby, greeting guests with rehearsed humility. They looked relaxed. That was new. The MC tapped the microphone. Applause rose and fell on cue. Chloe took the stage hand over her heart, voice warm and practiced. "Tonight isn't just about celebrating my parents," she said. "It's about family, about resilience." She paused. The room leaned in. "As many of you know," she continued on, eyes glistening just enough, "my little sister Sarah is still overseas, somewhere, serving. We don't always know where she is, but we hold her close." She dabbed at her eye. A photographer shifted position. "It breaks my heart that she couldn't be here to see how far we've come." I watched her say my name like it belonged to a story she controlled. The applause was immediate, warm, sympathetic. My mother bowed her head. My father squeezed her hand. I didn't move. Chloe kept talking. About sacrifice, about strength, about how loss teaches gratitude. She spoke in the past tense without ever saying it outright. I checked my watch. Right on time. Every phone in the room chimed at once. Not a text, not a call, an alert. The murmurs spread like a ripple. Heads turned. People glanced at screens. The MC froze mid-smile. The large display behind the stage flickered. Then it switched. The seal of the governor's office filled the screen. Silence hit the room like a held breath. The governor appeared flanked by uniformed officers. His voice was steady, formal. "Tonight," he said, "we recognize a service member whose actions saved lives during a recent classified operation overseas." Chloe turned slowly, confusion breaking through her composure. The screen shifted to footage. Blurred faces, movement through smoke. A woman leading a group through terrain that looked nothing like the curated world Chloe sold. The woman was me, my shoulder wrapped, my posture steady, my voice issuing commands clipped and calm. The room didn't make a sound. The governor spoke again. Major Sarah Miller demonstrated extraordinary leadership during a 14-day extraction following a downed aircraft. Against overwhelming odds, she ensured the safe return of all hostages and personnel. My mother's smile collapsed. My father stood halfway out of his chair. "And tonight," the governor continued, "we honor her publicly." The camera angle widened. I stood. The movement drew eyes, first nearby, then across the room. A ripple of recognition spreading too late. Chloe stared as I walked forward. Her microphone lowered inch by inch, like gravity had finally found it. I didn't rush. I didn't hesitate. I walked like I belonged everywhere I put my feet. When I reached the stage, the governor's image paused behind me. The room felt smaller, sharper. Chloe's hand trembled as I took the microphone from her. She didn't resist. She couldn't. I faced the crowd. "Thank you," I said evenly. "Governor," applause tried to start. I lifted a hand. It stopped. "I want to clarify something," I continued. "I didn't know this event was happening tonight. I turned slightly just enough to face my family. I didn't know my sister had been speaking about me in the past tense. A few people shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know my parents had been consulting lawyers about my estate while I was listed as missing. The room exhaled in fragments. I also didn't know my savings account had been emptied to purchase a luxury vehicle I added, using a forged signature. Chloe made a sound then, small, sharp. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth is, I said, turning back to the camera now, I don't have family here tonight. My mother started crying, loudly. My father tried to speak. I didn't look at them. The people who raised me decided I was expendable a long time ago, I said. Useful when silent, profitable when absent. The screen behind me changed again. Documents, dates, transactions, clean, undeniable. I handed the microphone back to Chloe. She couldn't hold it steady. Security moved in from the sides of the room. Military police, calm, professional. My parents were approached first, then Chloe. The noise returned all at once. Gasps, whispers, phones raised again, but this time without filters. Chloe dropped to her knees. Sarah, she said, voice breaking. Please, we're family. I looked down at my hands. Scarred, steady. You're right, I said. You needed an image. I glanced at the sealed Mercedes footage now playing on the screen. Towed, tagged. This, I finished, is the last one I'm giving you. I stepped away from the stage as officers escorted them out. I didn't watch. Colonel Thorne met me near the exit. She nodded once. Outside, the night air was cool and quiet. For the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not relief. Alignment. The story they told about me was over, and the truth had already taken its place. The cold night air hit my face as the doors closed behind me, and I didn't slow down until the sound of the ballroom disappeared completely. Outside, flashing lights reflected off polished stone and tinted windows. Cameras had already found the entrance. They always do. I angled my shoulders, kept my expression neutral, and walked past without a word. Colonel Thorne stayed half a step behind me, close enough to signal support, without turning it into spectacle. That was intentional. Everything tonight had been. We got into the vehicle and pulled away before anyone could force a question through the glass. Only once the hotel faded into the distance did I allow myself to breathe out fully. Not relief, release. The legal process moved faster than people expect when evidence is clean. By morning, statements were taken, financial records reviewed, property claims frozen. The forged documents Chloe had used were already flagged. My parents' communications with the attorney were time-stamped and archived. Nothing dramatic, no shouting, just procedure. Marcus Webb met me in a quiet conference room that afternoon, files stacked neatly in front of him. He didn't offer sympathy. He didn't need to. They assumed you were gone, he said, matter of fact. They acted on that assumption. They acted before that, I replied. He nodded. Yes. This just made it visible. That distinction mattered. Charges were filed individually: forgery, financial exploitation of a service member, conspiracy to misappropriate protected assets, attempted coercion related to estate transfer. Chloe's influencer status didn't help her. In fact, it hurt. Public records tend to attract attention when your income depends on credibility. My parents tried to contact me twice, once through a mutual acquaintance, once through a voicemail left on a number they shouldn't have had. I didn't respond, not because I was angry, because engagement implies negotiation, and I wasn't negotiating reality. News coverage stayed factual at first, then speculative, then quieter. Interest always drops when there's no counter-narrative to feed on. Chloe lost sponsorships within 48 hours. Brands don't like uncertainty, especially not the kind backed by court documents. My parents' pharmacy was audited. Nothing criminal surfaced there, but trust is fragile. Customers notice patterns when someone else points them out. The house my grandmother left me remained untouched, locked down, protected. I visited it once early in the morning before anyone knew where I was staying. I stood in the doorway and let the stillness settle. Same creaky floorboards, same light through the kitchen window. It felt smaller than I remembered. That wasn't loss. That was growth. Colonel Thorne called me into her office 2 days later. She didn't sit behind her desk. She never did when the conversation mattered. You handled that cleanly, she said. I followed protocol. She smiled faintly. You defined it. There was an offer on the table. Advancement, visibility, a public-facing role with oversight authority. I listened. I considered. I declined. Not yet, I said. She didn't push, your call. That trust still mattered more to me than a title. My family's lawyer reached out once formally requesting mediation. He used words like reconciliation and misunderstanding. Marcus handled the response. There would be no mediation. Some things aren't conflicts. They're conclusions. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. No dramatic fallout, no confrontations, just a steady recalibration of a life that no longer had to account for interference. I adjusted my accounts, updated my directives, changed my emergency contacts. I slept better. When I thought about Chloe, it wasn't with satisfaction or pity. It was with distance, the kind that comes when you finally understand someone clearly. She hadn't been cruel because she hated me. She had been careless because she never considered me real. My parents hadn't chosen her because she was better. They had chosen her because she reflected them. That knowledge didn't harden me. It simplified things. I returned to work without ceremony. Briefings resumed. Planning cycles restarted. No one treated me differently. That was intentional too. Respect is most valuable when it isn't loud. One evening, as I reviewed a routine logistics report, a junior analyst paused at my door, hesitated. "Ma'am," she said, "can I ask you something?" I nodded. "How do you keep personal things from interfering with the job?" I considered the question carefully. "You don't," I said. "You just stop letting the wrong people define what's personal." She nodded slowly, like that answer would take time to unpack. I watched her leave and returned to the report, attention steady. That night, alone in my quarters, I replayed the moment Chloe had dropped the microphone. Not with triumph, with clarity. She hadn't been exposed by me. She had been exposed by her own assumptions. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. The family narrative I had carried for decades no longer had any authority over my decisions. I hadn't replaced it with anger or pride. I had replaced it with boundaries, and boundaries, unlike approval, hold their shape under pressure. The world didn't change after that night. I did. And that was enough. I stood alone in the quiet of my grandmother's house keys resting on the counter where she used to leave them, and realized this was the first decision in my life that didn't require anyone else's approval. The legal aftermath moved forward without drama. Court dates were scheduled, motions filed. Outcomes became predictable once the noise faded and only facts were left standing. My parents accepted a plea deal that kept their names out of the headlines but not out of the record. Chloe fought longer, she always did. Public apologies, carefully worded statements, claims of misunderstanding. None of it changed the documents. None of it changed the timeline. They didn't lose everything. They lost control. And for people like them, that was worse. I was asked more than once if I felt guilty, if I regretted how public it became, if I wished I had handled it quietly, privately, like family matters were supposed to be handled. The answer surprised some people. No. Because nothing about what they did was private. They forged my name. They spent my money. They planned my absence. They tried to inherit a future that wasn't theirs. Silence would have made me complicit. The truth didn't destroy my family. It revealed it. I returned to duty shortly after everything settled into motion. No press, no ceremony, just another briefing room, another stack of reports, another problem to solve. That normalcy mattered more than any recognition. Work has a way of restoring proportion. I took on more responsibility, but not more visibility. I trained younger analysts. I refined systems. I built redundancies that didn't depend on one person being indispensable. That I had learned was real security. People still asked about the broadcast sometimes. About the night everything flipped. I answered when it was relevant. Otherwise, I let it go. I wasn't interested in being known for my family's failure. I wanted to be known for my own consistency. Chloe tried to contact me again 6 months later. A letter this time, handwritten, apologetic in tone, strategic in content. She wrote about pressure, about expectations, about how she'd been young and influenced. She didn't mention the money, she didn't mention the house, she didn't mention the lawyer. I folded the letter once and put it away. Not as a reminder, as a record. Forgiveness isn't something you owe people who haven't acknowledged the full cost of what they did. It's something you offer when it no longer puts you at risk. I wasn't there yet, and I didn't rush it. My parents didn't write. They sent messages through intermediaries, mutual acquaintances, distant relatives. People who wanted to smooth things over because discomfort made them nervous. I declined every attempt. Not out of spite, out of accuracy. They hadn't wanted reconciliation when they thought I was gone. They wanted access. That difference matters. Over time, the noise died down. New stories replaced old ones. Chloe faded into a category the internet moves past quickly. My parents rebuilt a quieter life, one without the illusion that I would always be there to stabilize it. And I built something else entirely. A life with clear boundaries, with relationships that didn't require performance, with work that respected precision over presentation. I kept the house. Not because it was sentimental, but because it represented the one inheritance that had never tried to reshape me. Sometimes I sat in the kitchen and drank coffee in silence. Sometimes I didn't think about my family at all. That was the real change. Walking away didn't make me lonely, it made me lighter. I had spent so long carrying responsibility that wasn't mine, mistaking endurance for loyalty. Letting go didn't harden me, it aligned me. People who mistake your silence for weakness often panic when you finally speak. But the truth is, the moment that changed everything wasn't the broadcast. It was the moment I stopped explaining myself to people who had already decided who I was worth to them. I didn't win anything that night. I reclaimed it. If you've made it this far, I want to ask you something. Do you think walking away from family who repeatedly cross the line is strength? Or do you believe people deserve endless chances just because they share your blood? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you want to hear more real stories about boundaries, justice, and quiet resilience, make sure you subscribe. For most of my life, people mistook my silence for submission. They assumed that because I didn't argue, I agreed. Because I didn't explain myself, I had nothing to say. Because I didn't push back, I had nowhere else to go. That assumption protected me more than they ever knew. In my family, being loud meant being rewarded. Chloe was proof of that. She spoke first, spoke often, and spoke confidently, even when she was wrong. I learned early that volume was currency, and I didn't have the appetite for that economy. So I opted out, not dramatically, quietly. I didn't defend myself at dinner tables. I didn't correct my parents when they minimized my work. I didn't interrupt Chloe when she joked about me playing soldier or doing logistics. I let those versions of me exist because they were harmless to my actual progress. People confuse silence with fear because fear is loud in their own heads. But silence, when chosen, is a filter. It keeps the wrong people from attaching expectations to your future. When I enlisted, I didn't announce it like a protest. I signed papers, packed a bag, and left. I didn't make speeches about independence or sacrifice. I didn't need my family's approval to move forward. I needed distance. Silence created that distance. The truth is, explaining yourself to people who benefit from misunderstanding you is not honesty. It's negotiation, and negotiations assume equal power. I never had that in my family, so I stopped trying to earn it with words. In the military, I learned quickly that talking less didn't make you smaller. It made you precise. The people who survived longest weren't the ones with the best stories. They were the ones who listened, observed, and acted when it mattered. I carried that lesson everywhere. Being underestimated is uncomfortable, especially when you know you're capable of more. But it's also a rare advantage. When people don't expect much from you, they don't watch closely. They don't interfere. They don't feel entitled to the results of your effort. That space is where real growth happens. While my family thought I was drifting, I was building skills they didn't understand. While they assumed I was struggling, I was being trusted with responsibility that didn't need validation. While they dismissed my work as government stuff, I was learning how to operate under pressure without needing applause. I didn't correct them because correction would have invited attention. Attention would have invited control. Silence kept me out of reach. There's a version of self-advocacy that gets praised constantly, especially in American culture. Speak up, sell yourself, make your value visible. That advice isn't wrong, but it's incomplete. It assumes you're in an environment that rewards truth instead of exploiting it. Some environments don't. In families where one person is cast as the achiever and another as the fallback, speaking up doesn't level the field. It paints a target. Every success becomes something to claim. Every boundary becomes something to argue with. I didn't want my progress debated. I wanted it protected. So I let them believe I was small. I let them believe I was expendable. That belief shaped how they treated me, and eventually it exposed who they were. When the moment came, they didn't need my explanation. They needed my absence. That's when silence stopped being misread and started being understood. If you're listening to this and recognizing yourself, I want to be clear about something. Silence is only useful when it's chosen. Staying quiet because you're afraid to speak is different from staying quiet because you're waiting for the right terrain. There are times you should speak, when safety is at risk, when rights are being violated, when silence would make you complicit in harm. But there are also times when speaking too early costs you leverage you don't get back. If you're in a workplace where your ideas are taken, but your name is erased, silence can give you time to build undeniable proof. If you're in a family where your boundaries are mocked, silence can give you the space to prepare an exit that doesn't rely on permission. You don't owe your story to people who have already decided how they'll use it. One of the hardest lessons for me was accepting that not everyone deserves clarity. Some people earn access to your inner world. Others only get the version of you that keeps you safe. That's not deception, that's discernment. When my family finally saw who I was, it wasn't because I explained myself better. It was because the structure that benefited from my silence collapsed under its own assumptions. They counted me out. They moved forward without me. They revealed everything I needed to know. Silence didn't make me invisible forever. It made me unexploitable until the timing was right. If there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's this. You don't have to perform your growth for people who never invested in it. You don't have to announce your plans to people who confuse access with entitlement. Sometimes the strongest move you can make is to say, nothing, do the work, and let the results speak in a language no one can interrupt. For a long time, the hardest part of setting boundaries with my family wasn't the resistance. It was the guilt. Guilt has a very specific voice when it comes from family. It sounds reasonable, familiar. It reminds you of childhood sacrifices, shared holidays, and the unspoken rule that blood outranks behavior. It tells you that walking away is cruel, that endurance is love, and that silence is betrayal. I believed that voice longer than I should have. I was taught that loyalty meant availability, that if someone shared your last name, they were entitled to your time, your money, your patience, and your forgiveness, no matter how often they crossed the line. Boundaries, I was told, were for strangers. Family was different. That belief almost cost me everything. What I learned the hard way is this family is not exempt from accountability. And love that depends on access isn't love. It's leverage. In my family, boundaries were treated like insults. The first time I said no, it was framed as selfishness. The first time I protected my finances, it was called betrayal. The first time I stopped explaining myself, I was accused of being cold. Those reactions weren't misunderstandings. They were signals. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries will always call them cruelty. It took me years to recognize the pattern. I was the one who adapted. I was the one who covered gaps, smoothed conflicts, paid costs no one else wanted to claim. And every time I did, the expectation reset higher. There was no finish line, just a moving target that kept my role intact. When I finally stepped back, the narrative shifted instantly. I wasn't tired. I was ungrateful. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was dramatic. My boundaries weren't practical. They were personal attacks. That's when it clicked. They didn't want a relationship with me. They wanted a function. And functions don't get boundaries. People do. One of the most damaging myths about family is the idea that history alone earns infinite chances. But history doesn't tell you who someone is now. Behavior does. Patterns do. What people do when you say no tells you everything you need to know about whether they ever respected your yes. I didn't cut ties out of anger. I cut ties out of clarity. I saw what happened when they believed I was gone. How quickly love turned into inventory. How easily my absence became a financial conversation. That wasn't a lapse in judgment. That was truth unfiltered. Setting boundaries didn't require a confrontation scene or a dramatic declaration. It required consistency. I stopped answering certain calls. I stopped sharing details that could be weaponized. I stopped negotiating my limits to make other people comfortable. And I didn't explain. Explanation invites debate. Debate invites erosion. I wasn't interested in either. This is the part that's hardest for people to accept. You don't need someone else's understanding to enforce a boundary. You only need your own. If someone truly cares about you, a boundary doesn't threaten them. It informs them. If someone reacts with rage, guilt tripping, or manipulation, that boundary didn't cause the problem. It revealed it. Family systems that rely on one person to absorb pressure will fight hardest when that person steps back. Not because the boundary is wrong, but because the system can't function without the imbalance. When I stopped carrying what wasn't mine, things broke. That wasn't my failure. That was overdue. There's a difference between reconciliation and access. Reconciliation requires accountability, repair, and time. Access requires nothing but proximity. My family asked for access. They never offered repair, so I chose distance. Not forever necessarily, but long enough to be safe. Long enough to reset the terms. Long enough to remember who I was when I wasn't managing everyone else's expectations. If you're listening to this and struggling with the idea of setting boundaries with family, here's what I want you to hear clearly. You are not obligated to accept behavior that would be unacceptable from anyone else just because it comes from someone related to you. You're allowed to protect your finances, your time, your mental health, and your future. You're allowed to say no without offering a defense brief. Boundaries don't mean you don't love them. They mean you love yourself enough not to disappear. And no, it won't feel good at first. You may feel selfish. You may feel disloyal. You may feel like you're breaking a rule no one ever taught you how to question. That feeling passes. What replaces it is something steadier, something quieter, a sense of alignment that doesn't depend on approval. The people who belong in your life will adjust. The people who don't will expose themselves in the process. Either way, you gain clarity. Family is not defined by who can reach you. It's defined by who respects you when they can't. And learning that wasn't the loss of my family. It was the beginning of my peace. For a while after everything came out, people kept asking me if it felt good. They meant the broadcast, the arrests, the public shift where the story finally matched reality. They expected satisfaction, maybe even a sense of victory that came with a sharp edge. That isn't what it felt like. What I felt more than anything was quiet. Justice, at least the kind that lasts, doesn't sound like applause. It sounds like the end of noise you didn't realize you'd been living with for years. I had spent most of my life believing that closure came from confrontation, from saying the perfect sentence at the perfect moment, from watching the other side finally understand the damage they caused. That version of justice is popular. It looks good in movies, it feels proportional, but it also keeps you tied to the people who hurt you long after they've stopped thinking about you at all. Walking away didn't feel powerful at first. It felt unfinished. There was no dramatic goodbye, no final argument where everyone admitted fault. Just a series of decisions that slowly removed their access to my life. And that I learned was the point. Revenge keeps the focus on them. Justice puts the focus back where it belongs. For a long time, I confused endurance with strength. I thought staying meant I was resilient, that absorbing damage without complaint made me dependable. What I didn't see was how much of my identity had been shaped around managing other people's behavior. I wasn't living my life. I was containing theirs. When everything finally broke open, I didn't gain something new. I lost something heavy. The constant calculation, the background tension, the need to explain, justify, soften, or excuse. Walking away didn't make me smaller. It gave me back time. People assume justice has to be symmetrical. That harm must be answered with harm. That pain must be returned in equal measure. But that kind of thinking keeps you stuck inside the same system that hurt you in the first place. My family wanted engagement, arguments, reconciliation attempts that reset the cycle without changing the structure. What they didn't want was consequence without access. They didn't lose because I embarrassed them. They lost because they could no longer reach me. They could no longer shape the story. They could no longer treat my silence as consent. That kind of justice doesn't announce itself. It settles in. There's a moment after you step away from something toxic, when the absence feels strange. Your nervous system is used to friction. Without it, things can feel almost empty. That's when a lot of people go back, not because the situation improved, but because the quiet feels unfamiliar. I stayed. I learned to sit with the stillness, to let my days be defined by what I chose instead of what I reacted to. I built routines that didn't involve bracing for the next boundary violation. And slowly the quiet stopped feeling empty. It started feeling like freedom. Justice didn't restore my family. It restored my agency. It reminded me that my life didn't need an audience to be valid, and it didn't need permission to move forward. I didn't need them to admit wrongdoing. I needed them to stop having power over my decisions. That's the part people don't always understand. Closure isn't something someone else gives you. It's something you claim when you stop asking for explanations from people who benefit from your confusion. If you're listening to this and you're waiting for the moment when they finally apologize, finally see you, finally change, ask yourself an honest question. What happens if they never do? Does your life stay on hold? Justice isn't about making someone else regret what they did. It's about making sure they can't keep doing it. Sometimes that looks like legal action. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like building a life that doesn't include them at all. None of those options are failures. They're choices. The most powerful shift for me was realizing that I didn't owe anyone continued access just because they shared my history. History explains behavior. It doesn't excuse it. Walking away didn't erase what happened. It put it in the past where it belonged. And that's the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge keeps you looking backward, measuring damage. Justice lets you look forward, unburdened. So if you're standing at a crossroads right now wondering whether leaving makes you weak or whether staying makes you loyal, consider this. Strength isn't staying where you're diminished. And justice doesn't have to be loud to be final. Sometimes the most decisive thing you can do is choose peace and refuse to negotiate it ever again.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction created by artificial intelligence to heighten drama and emotion. But the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.